The ice in Richard's glass didn't even clink when Julian stood up. That's how quiet it got. He had that look on his face, the one he uses when he's about to close a deal on a half-bankrupt artist. Performative charm. High wattage. Zero substance. Dad. Mom. Naomi. Julian began, his hand resting on the back of the empty chair beside him. I'd like you all to meet Sienna Cruz. She's the creative force behind the new summer collection at the gallery. He paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. And, more importantly, she's the woman who's going to be standing beside me in the next chapter of my life. I kept my fork suspended over my plate of cold halibut. I didn't look at him. I looked at the tablecloth. Linen. Monogrammed RV. I filed that away for the asset list. Naomi choked on her Sancerre. Catherine's smile froze so perfectly it could have been sold at auction. Richard, to his credit, didn't move. He just stared at Julian like he was a bad quarterly report. Sienna smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was the kind of smile you practice in the mirror when you've spent years perfecting the art of looking like you belong somewhere you definitely don't. She was wearing a dress that cost more than most people's car payments, and it showed exactly why. Julian, Richard said finally, his voice low and dangerous. This is neither the time nor the place. It's exactly the place. Dad, Julian said, squeezing Sienna's shoulder. She leaned into him like a prop in a staged photo op. We're family. We should be honest with each other. I set my fork down. The sound of silver against porcelain was louder than Julian's announcement. I reached for my water glass, took a slow sip, and then turned my head to look at him. Honest? I asked. My voice didn't shake. I'd spent 15 years in merger negotiations. I knew how to keep my tone level when the other side was bluffing. You're introducing your mistress as your future wife at a family dinner, and you're calling it honesty? Sienna tilted her head, her dark hair catching the low light. Eleanor, I hope we can be civil. Julian and I. We have a real connection. It's bigger than contracts and bank accounts. I laughed, not a giggle, a short, sharp bark of a laugh that made Naomi wince. Bigger than bank accounts? Sweetheart, if it weren't for bank accounts, Julian wouldn't be able to afford the air in this room, let alone your connection. Don't talk to her like that, Julian snapped, finally looking at me. His eyes were bloodshot. He'd been drinking since the aperitif. You've been cold for years. Ellie, distant. This marriage has been over for a long time. If it's over, Julian, I said, leaning back in my chair, let's make it legal. Or did you think you'd get to skip the paperwork and go straight to the honeymoon phase with your creative force? Catherine finally found her voice, though it sounded like it was being dragged over gravel. Eleanor, please, let's not do this here. We can discuss this privately. Why privately? I cut her off. I opened my leather folio, the one I usually used for closing documents at the firm. Inside wasn't a dessert menu. It was a stack of papers, fresh from the printer, still warm to the touch. This affects the entire family. Richard co-signed the gallery loan. Catherine, you used the trust to pay off Julian's tax lien last year. Naomi, you're the silent partner in the LLC. You all have a stake in this. I slid the top copy across the table to Julian. He didn't take it. He just stared at the header. In the matter of the dissolution of marriage of Eleanor Whitmore and Julian Vance. What the hell is this? He asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. It's a divorce petition, I said, fully drafted, filed electronically with the New York County Clerk yesterday afternoon. This is your courtesy copy, along with a motion for temporary financial restraints, a discovery request for all gallery records dating back 5 years, and a preliminary valuation of marital assets. I started passing out copies, one to Richard, one to Catherine, one to Naomi, who took it with a shaking hand and a look of grim relief. I saved the last one for Sienna. I placed it neatly in front of her place setting, next to her untouched salad. And this one is for you. Sienna, I said. Page 4, Section 7. It outlines the dissipation of marital funds. Specifically, the $48,000 wire transfer from our joint operating account to Cruise Studios, LLC last month. Interesting name for a company registered 3 days before the transfer. Don't you think? Sienna's smile vanished. She looked at Julian, panic flashing in her eyes. Julian? What is she talking about? Julian's face had gone from red to a sickly white. He reached for the papers, but I put my hand over his. My rings dug into his skin. He flinched. Try to snatch them, Julian, and I'll add spoliation of evidence to the complaint. I murmured, loud enough for only him to hear. And domestic violence. I've got marks on my wrist from this morning that I haven't shown the judge yet. Want to guess which version she'll believe? He stopped moving. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Richard cleared his throat, his patrician demeanor cracking under the pressure. Eleanor, this is highly irregular. We can handle this discreetly. There's no need to involve the courts, or… Discreetly? I interrupted, looking at him now. You mean like Julian handled his affair? Or like you handled the missing funds from the family trust that I noticed when I reviewed the books last week? The ones you moved through the gallery to avoid capital gains taxes? I'm sure the IRS would love a discreet chat about that. Richard. The color drained from Richard's face. Catherine gasped softly, pressing a napkin to her lips. Naomi just stared at her plate, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Julian finally found his voice, though it was thin and reedy. You're insane. You've been planning this. I've been reviewing our finances since I noticed the credit card statements didn't match the gallery's PL. I corrected him. You introduced her as my replacement, Julian. I'm just making sure the transition is legally sound and expensive. Sienna pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm not staying here for this. This is a circus. By all means, leave, I said, picking up my wine glass again. But take the papers with you. You're named as a potential recipient of marital assets, which makes you a necessary party for discovery. My paralegal will be in touch to schedule a deposition. Wear something professional, and maybe a less obvious push-up bra. It's distracting from your artistic integrity. She looked at Julian, expecting him to defend her. He didn't. He was too busy reading the first page of the petition, his eyes scanning the alimony calculation. Eleanor. Catherine tried again, her voice trembling now. Think of the family name, the gallery's reputation. The gallery's reputation is already compromised by Julian's accounting and his taste in unregistered shell companies. I said, as for the family name, it's a Vance problem, not a Whitmore one. I kept my name on the door at the firm for a reason. I'll be fine. You might want to worry about the FDIC investigation into the private loans Richard's been guaranteeing. That did it. Richard stood up, so fast his chair nearly toppled. That's enough. Eleanor, you will not threaten this family. I'm not threatening you. Richard, I said, standing as well. I smoothed the front of my jacket. I'm informing you. There's a difference. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with my forensic accountant at 8. Julian, the temporary restraining order kicks in at midnight. That means no moving money, no selling assets, and no leaving the state without court approval. Try it, and I'll own the Hamptons house by sunrise. I gathered my folio and my purse. Naomi looked up at me, her eyes glassy. Ellie, she whispered. I paused. Call me tomorrow. Naomi, we'll talk about your buyout options for the LLC. You deserve better than being collateral damage in their mess. I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, Julian's humiliation, Richard's fury, Catherine's shock, Sienna's confusion. Only Naomi's gaze felt like anything close to understanding. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone. Marcus had texted twice. Marcus, Ellie. Don't go full scorched earth unless you're ready for fallout. I typed back quickly. Me, already done. Served everyone. Richard looks like he's having coronary. Julian hasn't spoken a word since page 2. Marcos Jesus. You really did it. Marcus, call me when you're clear. We need to talk about the offshore accounts. I tucked the phone away and stepped out into the cool night air. The town car was waiting. As I slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of Julian through the dining room window. He was still sitting at the table, head in his hands, while Sienna stood over him, gesticulating wildly. Catherine was on the phone, probably to her divorce attorney. Richard was pouring himself a very large bourbon. I told the driver to take me to the office. I had work to do. The petition was just the opening move. The real game was just beginning. And I'd spent the last 6 months learning every rule, every loophole, and every weakness in their armor. Julian thought he could replace me with a younger model. Fine, I'd let him, but I'd make sure the trade in value left him bankrupt, professionally ruined, and legally bound to a settlement that would fund Sienna's artistic endeavors for approximately 3 months before she realized she'd married a man with a negative net worth and a soon-to-be suspended license. I looked out the window as the car pulled away from the curb. The city lights blurred past. Somewhere behind me, a family was falling apart. In front of me, a new chapter was starting, one where I didn't have to share my spreadsheets, my equity, or my name with a man who thought fidelity was a foreign concept and consequences were for other people. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Marcus, you okay? Me, better than okay. I'm free, and I'm just getting started. I turned the phone off and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the silence in my head was absolute. No Julian, no Sienna, just the quiet hum of the engine and the satisfying click of a well-executed plan falling into place. Let them read the papers. Let them panic. Let them realize that while they were busy playing house, I'd been building a case. And in my world, cases didn't settle with handshakes and promises. They settled with judgments. Yeah, and the cold, hard truth. The town car merged onto the FDR drive. I watched the East River slide by, dark and deep, somewhere out there. Julian was probably trying to explain himself to Sienna. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the way he'd looked at me tonight, like I was an inconvenience he was finally done tolerating. I reached into my folio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the final page of the divorce petition, the signature line. I hadn't signed it yet. I wanted him to sign first, under duress, in front of a notary, with his father watching. That would be the real introduction. Not Sienna as his future wife, but me as his former one. And the last thing he'd ever get from me would be a pen and a court order. I folded the paper and put it away. The city was mine now, and I wasn't sharing. Marcus was already in my office when I got there, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, staring at the dual monitors like they owed him money. He didn't look up when I walked in. He hated it when I went off script. You served Sienna at the table, he said flatly, in front of Richard. Christ, Ellie, I didn't serve her, I said, hanging up my coat. I educated her. There's a difference. You know he's going to spin this, right? By morning, you'll be the unstable ex-wife who crashed her own anniversary dinner. I dropped into my chair and booted my workstation. Let him. I've already filed the TRO. He can't move a cent without a hearing. And I've got 3 reporters on speed dial who'd love a quote about a Vance Gallery restructuring. Marcus finally looked at me. He's got that look, part exhaustion, part admiration. You're enjoying this. I'm billing it at $600 an hour. I said, of course I'm enjoying it. I pulled up the prenup, executed 10 years ago, 2 weeks before the wedding. Standard US fare, separate property, limited alimony, sunset clause at year 7. Julian had always bragged that he'd negotiated it himself. He hadn't. He'd signed whatever his father's estate lawyer put in front of him because he was hungover and chasing a waitress from the rehearsal dinner. Section 4. Subsection C. I said, tapping the screen. Any appreciation in separately held business assets due to the active efforts of either party shall constitute marital property. Marcus leaned in. You're saying the gallery's increase in value is marital? I'm saying Julian's active efforts, his curating, his vision, his 14-hour days schmoozing collectors directly grew the valuation from $2 million to $22 million. That's $20 million in marital appreciation. Minus liabilities, of course, which you've already calculated, down to the penny. I pulled up the spreadsheet. He's been running the gallery like a personal ATM. Unreported cash sales, inflated framing invoices, kickbacks from printers in Brooklyn. I've got 3 months of bank statements showing transfers to accounts in Sienna's name that he forgot to disclose. Marcus whistled. You've got him on tax fraud, too. I've got him on enough to make a plea deal look like a gift. I leaned back. But here's the thing. Richard guaranteed the lease and the line of credit. If Julian goes down, the bank calls the loan. Richard has to cover it, or the gallery gets liquidated. And we both know he can't afford a fire sale in an election year. Marcus was quiet for a beat. Then he said, Naomi called me. I looked at him. When? An hour ago. She's scared. She says Julian's been dipping into the family trust, the one Grandpa Vance set up for artistic preservation. She thinks he's moved close to 400 grand into that shell company you mentioned. Cruz Estudios. I nodded. I found the wire transfers, but I couldn't trace the beneficiary without a subpoena. Naomi give you anything? She gave me the trustee's name, and a heads up that Richard's already lawyered up. They'll move to seal the trust records by Monday. Then we move faster. I said, file the motion for expedited discovery. First thing. I want every email, every invoice, every text Julian sent about that trust. And I want Sienna's deposition scheduled before she lawyers up. You think she'll talk? I think she's 26, in over her head, and suddenly realizing her sugar, daddy, might be financially radioactive. I opened a new draft. Draft her invitation. Make it sound friendly, like we're offering her a chance to clarify her role before things get messy. Marcus started typing. You're a terrifying person. Ellie. I'm a prepared one. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. Eleanor Whitmore? A woman's voice. Clipped. Expensive. Speaking. This is Victoria Hargrove. I represent Mr. Vance and the Vance family interests. Of course she did. She was Richard's fixer. Literally wrote the book on high society reputational damage control. Victoria. I said, I'd say it's a pleasure. But we both know that's not why you're calling. Cut the theatrics. Richard wants this contained. He's willing to offer a generous settlement, the apartment, the Hampton house, a 7-figure buyout. In exchange, you withdraw the petition, drop the TRO, and sign a comprehensive NDA. Marcus mouthed don't. I smiled. Generous. But I'm not interested in buying silence. I'm interested in enforcing my rights. And Julian's obligations. You're making a mistake, Victoria said, her tone cooling. Julian is the face of that gallery. Without him, the brand collapses. Your marital appreciation argument won't mean a thing if there's no business left. Then I'll liquidate the brand. I said, I'll sell the inventory, the client list, the domain names. I'll auction off Julian's precious curatorial vision to the highest bidder, and I'll do it under court supervision, with a receiver appointed by a judge who owes me a favor. How's that for brand management? Silence on the line. Then you're bluffing. Am I? Pull the records on Vance v. Mercer. 2018, I was lead counsel. The receiver I recommended. She's now a federal magistrate in the Southern District. I have lunch with her next Tuesday. Should I mention your name? Another pause. Longer this time. This conversation never happened. Oh, it happened. Victoria. And if Richard wants to contain this, he can start by telling Julian to stop texting Sienna from the house phone. I've already got the logs. I hung up. Marcus was staring at me. You didn't. I do. IT, trace the pings to the guest suite at the Hamptons house. Richard's guest suite. I turned the monitor toward him. Look at the timestamps. 3 a.m. every night for the last 2 weeks. Marcus sat back slowly. Holy shit. Richard and Sienna? Not confirmed. But the data doesn't lie. And if it's true, Julian isn't just cuckolded. He's been played by his own father. I felt a cold sort of satisfaction settle in my chest. And that, Marcus, is leverage. You're going to use that. I'm going to keep it in my back pocket until I need it, preferably during mediation. When Richard starts lecturing me about family values, my desk phone rang. Internal line. Reception. Ms. Whitmore? There's a Ms. Naomi Vance here to see you. She says it's urgent. I glanced at Marcus. He nodded. Send her in. Naomi walked in like she was fleeing a crime scene. Her hair was windblown, her coat unbuttoned, and she was clutching a manila envelope like it was a lifeline. She didn't sit. She just stood there, shaking. He knows, she whispered. Julian, he knows I talked to you. He cornered me in the kitchen after you left. Said if I testified, he'd ruin me. Said Dad would cut me off. I stood and walked around the desk. I didn't touch her. I just looked her in the eye. Your brother is a bully, Naomi. And bullies only win when people stay quiet. Sit down. Tell me what you brought. She sank into the chair, fumbling with the envelope. She pulled out a stack of papers, bank statements, emails, screenshots. These are from the trust. Julian's been moving money since January, but it's worse than the 400 grand. Look at this. She pointed to a series of transfers, each one routed through a Cayman Islands entity called Azure Horizon Limited. Then, 3 days later, a matching deposit into Sienna's personal checking account. He's laundering money through her. I said, my mind already racing ahead, using the gallery's international sales to mask the movement of trust funds. And Dad knows, Naomi said, her voice breaking. He approved the transfers. I saw the signature cards. Richard Vance, authorized signatory. He's been covering for Julian for years. Marcus swore under his breath. That's not just a divorce case anymore. That's RICO. Not yet, I said, but it's certainly a federal case. Securities fraud, tax evasion, criminal contempt of the TRO. And Richard just became a co-conspirator. Naomi looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. What do I do? I can't go home. Julian said he'd make sure I never work in this town again. I knelt down so we were eye level. You're going to do exactly what I tell you. First, you're going to sign an affidavit. Marcus will draft it. Second, you're going to stay in a hotel under an assumed name. I'll pay for it. Third, you're going to stop answering Julian's calls. From now on, all communication goes through me. And then we bury them. I said, legally, financially, professionally, we take everything they've built and we turn it into evidence. And when it's over, you'll walk away with your dignity and your buyout, and they'll walk away with a court-appointed monitor and a permanent record. Naomi nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay, just don't let them win. They already lost. I said, standing. They just haven't realized it yet. I walked her to the conference room, where Marcus was already setting up the recorder. On my way back to my office, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Probably Julian, or Sienna, or Richard. I opened it. Unknown, you think you're so smart. You don't know the half of it. Stay away from Naomi, or you'll regret this. I deleted it. Then I opened a new document and started typing. The subject line, United States v. Vance, ETL. I didn't finish it. Not yet. But I saved it, because someday I might need it. And in my world, you didn't wait for the other side to make the first move. You made the first move, the second move, and the checkmate, all before they realized the game had even started. I looked out at the skyline. The sun was coming up. Somewhere, Julian was waking up to a nightmare of his own making. Sienna was realizing her future husband was a felon in waiting. Richard was realizing his empire had a foundation of sand. And I was just getting started. Marcus, I called out, get me everything on Azure Horizon. Offshore registrations, beneficial owners, banking relationships, and call the U.S. Attorney's Office. Ask for Diane. Tell her I've got a present for her. Something involving art, lies, and a lot of missing zeros. He didn't answer. He was already on the phone, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I smiled. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a takeover. And I'd spent a decade learning how to dismantle companies piece by piece. A family? That was just a smaller, more dysfunctional corporation. And I was about to become the majority shareholder. The discovery room at Sullivan Bell smelled like toner and stale coffee. Standard. I'd spent half my career in rooms like this, buried under document codes and privilege logs. Today, though, the stakes weren't some faceless merger. They were sitting across the table in $1,000 suits. Julian looked like he hadn't slept. Dark circles, jittery hands, a fresh haircut that couldn't hide the panic. Next to him, Victoria Hargrove looked like she'd slept just fine on a bed of nails. She was shuffling a stack of production docs like they were poker chips. Morning, Victoria, I said, dropping my laptop bag onto the table. You're looking rested. I assume Richard's not here because he's busy explaining Cayman Islands disclosure rules to the SEC? Victoria didn't blink. Save the theatrics. Eleanor, we've produced everything required under the initial scheduling order. Your paralegal has the thumb drives. I opened my laptop. Everything. Funny. My forensic accountant counted 47 missing wire transfers between Azure Horizon and the gallery's operating account, and another 12 from Azure to Sienna Cruz's personal Chase account. Did those get lost in the mail? Julian leaned forward, jabbing a finger. You're making this up. That's a fishing expedition. It's called a paper trail. Julian, I said, sliding a printed bank statement across the table. See these? These are real. Unlike your claim that Sienna's studio has actual clients. She's moved 80 grand through that account in 6 months. That's not art sales. That's a stipend, paid for by your father's trust. Victoria intercepted the paper. Irrelevant. Ms. Cruz's finances are not at issue in this dissolution proceeding. They are when the funds are marital, I said, or when they're the product of criminal conversion of trust assets, which, last I checked, violates New York estates. Powers Trust's Law Section 11-1. 6. Shall I read it to you? Enough. Julian snapped. This is about us. About our marriage. Why are you dragging Sienna into this? Because you introduced her as my replacement at a family dinner. Julian, you made her relevant. And now, thanks to Naomi's affidavit, we know she's been sleeping with your father. 2. How's that for a blended family? He recoiled like I'd slapped him. Victoria's pen paused mid-note. I watched the color drain from his face. Good. He needed to understand this wasn't a negotiation. It was a demolition. You're vicious. Careful. I cut in. Defamatory language in a deposition gets flagged for sanctions. And I've got a judge who hates surprises. Speaking of which, I pulled up a new document. Victoria, I assume you've seen the IRS Form 8300 filings for the gallery's cash transactions over 10,000? Because I have. And there's a pattern of omission that suggests structuring. That's a felony. Julian, up to 5 years. But I'm sure your dad's golf buddy at the U.S. Attorney's Office can make it disappear, right? Victoria finally spoke, her voice tight. You're threatening a federal investigation. I'm stating facts, I said. And here's another one. The receiver I mentioned? She called me this morning. She's preliminarily inclined to appoint a monitor for the gallery's finances pending trial. That means every invoice, every sale, every payroll entry gets reviewed by someone who doesn't care about your artistic vision. They care about math. And right now, your math doesn't math. Julian looked at Victoria, desperation in his eyes. Do something. I am doing something, she said through gritted teeth. I'm trying to keep you out of Rikers. Eleanor, this ends now. Name your number. I leaned back. There is no number. Not yet. First, I want a full accounting of the trust. Every disbursement, every signature, every email discussing Azure Horizon. Second, I want Sienna's deposition, scheduled for Friday, under oath, with a court reporter. Third, I want Julian to sign a stipulation waiving any claim to the Hamptons' house. In exchange, I won't file a criminal referral by noon. You can't, Julian started. I can, I said, and I will, because unlike you, I read the prenup. Section 9, Paragraph B. Fraudulent conveyance or dissipation of marital assets in anticipation of dissolution constitutes a material breach, entitling the aggrieved party to equitable distribution plus punitive damages. That's legalese for pay up or shut up. Victoria closed her folder with a snap. We'll review your demands and respond by end of day. You'll respond by 11, I said, checking my watch, because at 11:05, I'm walking into Diane's office at the Southern District, and I'm bringing copies of everything Naomi signed, including the part where Richard told her to lose the trust ledgers. I stood, gathering my things. One more thing. Tell Sienna the gift she received last week, the one from the Nevis account. The IRS considers that taxable income, and since she didn't report it, she's looking at failure to file, plus penalties. I'd hate for her to learn that the hard way, while sitting in a holding cell. I walked out. Marcus was waiting in the hall, leaning against the wall. How'd it go? They're scared, I said. Julian's unraveling. Victoria's bluffing. And Richard's about to learn that fixing things only works when the other side plays by the rules. I don't. My phone buzzed. A text from Naomi. Naomi, Julian just called. Screaming. Said Dad admitted everything. About the trust. About Sienna. He's threatening to cut Julian off completely. What do I do? I texted back. Record every call. Save every text. And stay where you are. I'm sending a car. Marcus fell into step beside me. Diane's office? Scheduled for 1, but I won't need it. Victoria will cave by noon. She knows Diane and I clerk together. And Diane hates financial crimes in the art world. Thinks it's unseemly. You've got this mapped out. I've got 10 years of Julian's financial history mapped out. Every lie, every shortcut, every illegal detour. He thought he was building a brand. He was building a case against himself. Back in my office, I pulled up the draft complaint for United States v. Vance. I added a footnote citing the Discovery Exchange. Then I opened a new email to Sienna's agent, a kid named Tyler who thought representing emerging talent meant ignoring basic KYC rules. Subject: Preservation of Evidence, Cruise Studios, LLC. Tyler, this is Eleanor Whitmore. I represent Julian Vance in the matter of his dissolution. It has come to my attention that certain funds transferred to your client's LLC may constitute marital property and or proceeds of criminal fraud. You are hereby instructed to preserve all records, including but not limited to bank statements, sales invoices, and communications regarding funding sources. Spoliation will be met with immediate sanctions and referral to the New York State Bar Association. Do not advise your client to delete anything, ever. I hit send. Then I leaned back and watched the cursor blink. The silence in the office was different now. It wasn't the hollow quiet of loneliness. It was the charged silence before verdict, before a settlement, before a collapse. My desk phone rang. Victoria, Eleanor, we've reviewed your proposals. Richard is willing to agree to the accounting and the stipulation regarding the Hamptons property. However, Sienna's deposition is non-negotiable. She's not a party to the trust. She's a witness to its misuse, I said, and a beneficiary under New York CPLR 3101A. I'm entitled to her testimony regarding any matter material and necessary. Her relationship with Richard? Material. The money trail? Necessary. Pick a date. Victoria. Or I'll pick one for you. And I'll make sure the courthouse steps are crowded. Friday. She bit out. 10 a.m. But Richard will not be attending. Good. He'd only perjure himself. And I'd hate to waste a subpoena. I hung up. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Friday's deposition. You want me there? I want you prepping the exhibit list. Focus on the Nevis transfers and the trust signatures. And get me everything on Richard's golf trips to Lyford Cay. If he met with the Azure Horizon principals. I want flight manifests. You think he'll flip on Julian? I think he'll do whatever keeps him out of a jumpsuit. And if that means throwing Julian under the bus to save his own neck, he'll back up the truck. I opened the Discovery database. Thousands of documents, emails, invoices, texts, all of them leading to one conclusion. Julian Vance wasn't a victim. He was a participant. And Richard Vance wasn't a patriarch. He was an enabler. And Sienna? She was just the latest in a long line of expensive mistakes they'd tried to bury under layers of offshore shell companies and non-disclosure agreements. But I didn't do NDAs. I did depositions. I did subpoenas. I did the kind of due diligence that left billionaires sweating through their bespoke shirts. I clicked print on the final set of interrogatories. The machine whirred to life, spitting out page after page of Julian's lies, translated into numbered requests for admission. Let him deny them. Let him try to explain why his signature was on a trust withdrawal he claimed he never saw. Let him tell a federal judge that artistic vision justified tax evasion. I'd be there, with the documents, with the witnesses, with the truth. And when it was over, I wouldn't just have a divorce decree. I'd have a precedent, a warning, a message to every Julian Vance in every Upper East Side brownstone. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and the prize? It's always measured in years, and dollars, and the echo of a gavel hitting wood. My phone buzzed again. A news alert. Vance Gallery faces inquiry over art valuations. I smiled. Diane worked fast. Marcus. I called out. Draft a press statement. Keep it vague. We welcome the opportunity to cooperate fully with any inquiry. And add a line about transparency in the art market. It'll make Richard's head explode. I watched the news ticker scroll. The Vance name, once synonymous with old money and good taste, was now trending next to words like probe and audit. Perfect. I picked up the phone and dialed Naomi. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaky. Ellie, I just saw the news. Is it starting? It's starting. I said, stay put. Don't talk to anyone. And whatever you do, don't feel sorry for him. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with them. I hung up. Then I turned back to the discovery, to the paper trail, to the truth. The game wasn't just afoot. It was already won. All that was left was the counting. The court reporter's machine started clicking the second Sienna Cruz raised her right hand. She was wearing a cream-colored sheath dress that probably cost more than her first car. And she'd piled her hair up like she was auditioning for a role in a period drama. She looked everywhere except at me. Victoria Hargrove sat beside her, spine rigid, already objecting in her head. Julian was across the table, slouched low, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Richard hadn't shown. Smart man. State your full name for the record. The reporter said, Sienna Marie Cruz. Her voice was steady, but her left knee was bouncing under the table. I leaned forward, pen poised over my legal pad. Ms. Cruz, were you romantically involved with Julian Vance prior to his introduction of you as his future wife on August 12th. Victoria opened her mouth, but Sienna answered first. Yes. Objection. Victoria said automatically. Relevance. Relevant to the dissipation of marital assets. Your Honor, I said, though we weren't in front of a judge yet. Ms. Cruz received substantial sums from entities controlled by Mr. Vance during the period of their involvement. Overruled. I muttered for the record. Continue. Ms. Cruz. We started seeing each other in March, she said, after the Miami Fair. And during that time, did Mr. Vance ever discuss his marital status with you? He said it was over, that you were cold, distant. She glanced at Julian, who was staring at his hands. I'm not asking what he said about me, I said evenly. I'm asking if he told you he was legally married. Yes or no? Yes, she whispered. And despite knowing he was legally married, you accepted payments totaling $81,000 from an entity identified as Cruz Studios, LLC, correct? Victoria cut in. Objection. Calls for a legal conclusion. Also, Ms. Cruz's personal finances are not at issue. They are when the funds originated from the Vance Family Irrevocable Trust. I snapped. Ms. Cruz, do you recognize this? I slid a copy of the bank transfer across the table. April 15th, $50,000. Originating account, Vance Family Trust. Signatory, Richard Vance. Destination, Cruz Studios, LLC. Operating account. Her eyes widened. She looked at Victoria, who was frantically flipping through her own copy. I thought it was from Julian. For my show. He said it was a private investment. Did Julian tell you the money came from his father's trust? No, she said, her voice cracking. He said his dad believed in me, that Richard wanted to support emerging talent. I turned to Julian. Mr. Vance, did you inform Ms. Cruz that the funds used to pay her were stolen from a trust established for the benefit of your children? Objection. Victoria shouted, leading, argumentative, withdrawn. I said mildly, but Ms. Cruz, did Julian ever mention a company called Azure Horizon Limited? She paled. That was the consulting firm he said handled his international sales. It's a shell company in the Caymans, I said, registered to a post office box. No employees, no website. But it moved $400,000 from the Vance Trust into accounts controlled by Julian, and then into your account. Does that sound like consulting to you? Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at Julian again, this time with something like betrayal. Julian, is that true? Julian finally looked up. His face was blotchy, his eyes bloodshot. Sienna, don't listen to her. She's twisting everything. I'm not twisting anything, I said. I'm reading from the Cayman Islands General Registry. Azure Horizon was incorporated 2 days after Richard Vance signed the first unauthorized withdrawal from the trust. And the director? Samuel Petrov. Know him, Julian? He's our guy in Georgetown. Julian mumbled. He's a known facilitator of money laundering, I said. And he's currently under indictment in the Southern District. But that's not your problem, is it? Your problem is that you used your mistress as a conduit for stolen trust funds. And you did it with your father's knowledge. I turned back to Sienna. Ms. Cruz, did Julian or Richard Vance ever ask you to sign documents relating to Azure Horizon? Or to Cruz Studios? She nodded, swiping at her eyes. Once. Julian said it was a vendor agreement. I just signed where he told me. And did you ever receive a copy of that agreement? No. He said it wasn't necessary. Objection. Victoria said weakly. Foundation. I'll lay the foundation. I said, Marcus, pull the signature specimen from the Cayman filing. I waited while he queued it up, then slid a magnified image in front of Sienna. Is that your signature, Ms. Cruz? She stared at it, nodded. Yes, but I didn't know what it was for. You signed a document making Cruise Studios the beneficial owner of Azure Horizon. I said, which means you're the legal owner of a company that laundered trust funds. Congratulations. You're now a witness in a federal criminal investigation, possibly a defendant. The room went dead silent except for the court reporter's keys. Julian looked like he might vomit. Victoria was scribbling furiously, her face pale. Eleanor, Julian croaked. You can't. You're making her sound like a criminal. I'm stating facts. Julian, I said. Facts your father understood when he approved the transfers. Facts your sister, Naomi, documented in her affidavit. Facts that are about to be presented to a grand jury. I turned back to Sienna. Ms. Cruz, do you recall meeting Richard Vance at the Carlisle Hotel on June 3rd? Approximately 9 p.m. She hesitated. Yes. He wanted to discuss my career trajectory. And during that meeting, did he give you anything? A check, she whispered, for $20,000. He said it was a personal gift. Did he ask you to keep the meeting confidential? Yes. He said Julian wouldn't understand, that it was between us. I let that hang in the air. Then I turned to Julian. Hear that, Julian? Your father was paying your mistress behind your back, and you were too busy playing the victim to notice you were being played yourself. Shut up. Julian surged to his feet, knocking his chair over. Just shut up. Ellie, you're enjoying this. You're ruining everyone's lives. I'm exposing the truth, I said, my voice dangerously calm. You introduced her as your future wife. You made her a public figure in this family's collapse. And now you're shocked that the consequences include criminal liability? Sit down, Julian, or I'll have the marshals escort you out. And trust me, that won't look good in the bail report. He stayed standing, chest heaving. Victoria grabbed his arm, pulling him down. Julian, control yourself. Eleanor, this is outrageous. You're badgering the witness. She's not a witness, I said. She's a victim of Julian's greed and Richard's arrogance. And I'm the only one in this room who's not pretending otherwise. I looked at Sienna. Ms. Cruz, one final question. Has Julian Vance or Richard Vance ever asked you to lie about the source of the funds you received? She looked at Victoria, then at Julian, then back at me. Yes, she whispered. Julian said if anyone asked, to say it was a gallery advance. Richard said if I talked, he'd make sure I never sold a painting in this country again. Victoria dropped her pen. Julian put his head in his hands. The court reporter didn't stop typing. I gathered my papers slowly. Thank you, Ms. Cruz. That'll be all for today. Victoria, I'll expect your client's deposition to be rescheduled within 7 days. And tell Richard I'll be filing a motion to compel his testimony by Monday. He can explain to a judge why a personal gift to his son's mistress came from a trust meant for his grandchildren. I stood. Marcus followed. At the door, I paused and looked back at Julian. He was still hunched over the table, shoulders shaking. Sienna was crying openly now, Victoria handing her tissues like they were holy sacraments. Julian, I said, you wanted a new chapter. This is the epilogue, and it's written in discovery responses and bank records. Hope she was worth it. I walked out. The hallway was quiet. Marcus fell into step beside me. Jesus, Ellie, you just blew the lid off the whole thing. I just asked questions. I said. They provided the answers. Now the U.S. Attorney's Office has everything they need for a conspiracy charge. And Richard, he's looking at trustee malfeasance, wire fraud, and witness tampering. Minimum sentence? 10 years. And that's before the IRS gets involved. What about Sienna? She'll get immunity. Maybe. If she cooperates. But her career's over. No reputable gallery will touch her after this. She'll be known as the girl who slept with a father and son and laundered their money. I pressed the elevator button. And Julian, he'll lose the gallery, the trust, and his freedom. Victoria will negotiate a plea, but it won't matter. The Southern District doesn't forget. The elevator doors opened. As we stepped in, my phone buzzed. Naomi. Ellie? I just got a call from Dad's secretary. He's packing a bag, talking about staying with friends. Is he running? He's trying, I said, but the marshals already have a hold on his passport. He's not going anywhere, and neither is Julian. Tell me you're safe. I'm at the apartment on Perry Street. I won't answer the door. But Ellie, is it really over? The marriage is, I said. The trust is. The gallery is. All that's left is the sentencing. The elevator descended. Stay put. I'll send someone for you tomorrow. And Naomi? Don't cry for them. They made their choices. Now they live with them. I hung up. Marcus looked at me. You okay? I'm fine, I said. Better than fine. I'm free. And they're finished. The elevator opened to the lobby. Reporters were already clustered outside. Cameras flashing. I squared my shoulders. Time to give them a quote. I walked toward the doors, my heels clicking on the marble. Behind me, the deposition room was silent except for the sound of a young woman's sobs and a middle-aged man's defeat. Ahead of me, the truth waited, and I was ready to tell it. Ms. Whitmore, a reporter shouted. Any comment on the allegations against the Vance family? I stopped, turned, and met the camera lens. Only that in matters of trust, blood isn't thicker than water. It's just easier to bleed. Then I walked out into the sunlight, leaving the wreckage behind.